All right, so welcome everyone to the session 8 of Project Management Professional Training Sessions. So in this session, we are going to look into WBS, which is a very critical component, and we call it work breakdown structure. Now, before that, I will just take a step back and let me just give you a brief highlight about what we did in the lesson 7. So lesson 7, we went with the scope and how we determine the scope baseline. So we discussed that there are three baselines in a project, and the three constraints or the three baselines are scope, cost, and time. And when we spoke about scope baseline, then we told that in scope baseline, the way to determine the scope baseline is by combining three things. The first one is project scope statement. The second one is WBS, and the third one is WBS dictionary. Okay, so the second and the third component I'm going to discuss right now in this particular lesson. And the first one, the project scope statement, just to give you a brief again, the project scope statement, we get the requirement, we capture the requirements of the scope mainly from the project charter, where we have got certain components of the project there, which are being captured in a high level, and we take it from there. And we also do interviews, meetings 1:1 with the stakeholders, and we capture the project requirements from the stakeholders. And the third part is that we also go through the company historical data, if there was a similar kind of project in the past, and from there also we pick up some requirements. Now, that's kind of the project scope statement. And you might be asking that when we already got the project scope statement, then why do we need to have a work breakdown structure or a work breakdown structure dictionary? Okay, so point is that project scope statement will give you not the entire detail. Okay, and when we talk about the work breakdown structure, that's like gives you the exact visual representation of the complete scope of the project. Now, project scope statement can be done by the PM himself or herself. Like they can talk with the stakeholders, and they can go to the project charter, and they can find out a couple of the inputs for the project scope statement. But when it comes to WBS, the WBS is not written or documented by the PM alone. Okay, it's like a complete teamwork. The entire project team, they work together like a kind of a workshop, and the duty of the project manager is to facilitate that workshop, to ensure that all the ideas are on the table, the entire scope is on the table, and put them in levels. Now we'll come that in details what exactly in a WBS. Okay, and then we'll also check how to create the WBS, and finally the benefits of WBS. So again, back to the same slide, which probably I've been showing from the last couple of lessons. So we are right now in the planning stage. Now, planning stage is the stage where the maximum amount of work is done in a project. And if you do proper planning, your execution stage is nothing but to follow the plan. You will be having a certain component called change management, which is a critical core component in monitoring and control. And then again, you go with closing, which has got a couple of steps here. But planning is the most important, the core of the project. Now, in planning, okay, unlike any other of the process groups, in planning, all the steps that we are having is in a sequential pattern. So you might be seeing that I look into the scope first. So I determine the scope baseline with the help of the project scope statement and the WBS and the WBS dictionary. I got the scope baseline, and WBS dictionary will actually decompose the deliverables of the project into work packages. Again, I'm going to come into detail into that. So it's only going to break down the deliverables of the project into work packages and not into activities. Okay, I'll come to that in detail. So again, once you are done with the WBS and the scope baseline, then you are getting into activities, the network diagram, then scheduling, finding out the critical path, and then cost. And probably you might be thinking, why do we do all that? Why do we do all that in sequence? So the answer is that if my scope is crystal clear, which is a must, which is 100% must for any project, okay, at least for any waterfall model project. For agile, it's fine, the scope keeps on changing, right? But for waterfall project, you need to be 100% sure about the project scope in the beginning of the project. If your project scope is extremely clear and correct, then the next two parts, like determining the time baseline, which is nothing but you get the scope and you get the work packages, and then you break it down into activities, which is very similar to the task list, which you see in the workfront stencils for CIB or CIS. Now, those activities, then you put them in an order, like they can be in a sequential order or they can be parallel. Then you find out the dependencies, and then you get into the network diagram, then you get into the critical path, and finally you go ahead and make sure the schedule is being developed for the project, right? So if your scope itself is not correct, it will definitely be resulting in an incorrect schedule. And again, if your schedule is correct, okay, then finding out the cost of the project is not a big deal, which means that you will be knowing the time frame which is being needed from X to Y. Say milestone 3 to milestone 4, you will be knowing the duration, right? 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And if you know the number of the activities between this 3 to 4 weeks or 5 weeks, that the duration is known, and you know the cost of the man hour per week per month, then it's very easy to just do a multiplication and find out how much man hour cost is there for that particular activity, right? And then you can also figure out the cost of the different components which you're going to purchase from different vendors and suppliers, and you can add them all and find out the cost of the project. Again, we are going to do a complete deep dive into scheduling and cost. But like I said, scope is the very first thing. Okay, and then once we are done with the scope, and if you look into this particular diagram which I've shared in the past lessons as well, once you are done with the scope, which is a part of planning, and then scheduling, and then cost, that's the order which we go. We never go with scope, cost, schedule, and all that. We go scope, schedule, cost, and then the rest of the things will be done in the similar order, like quality, then resources, then communication management, how many like com channels through email or through phone calls or through one is to one or daily stand up, that will be set apart, set there in the planning, then risk management, then procurement, and finally stakeholder. And you will see that scope is not checked again in the execution. Execution, you don't care about the scope there, right? Because scope is already being drafted and solidified in the planning stage. That's been frozen, right? So when you get into execution, you just follow the plan, you follow the project plan. The output of the planning stage is the project plan. So you follow the project plan in the execution stage. If there is additional scope to be added or subtracted during the execution, that will be taken care in the monitoring and control. And that's where you get the change management program there. Okay. All right. Coming down to WBS, or work breakdown structure. Now, when we decompose a project into multiple items or activities or tasks, okay, the first thing which comes to your mind is that, are we talking about something similar to the work front list of items in a stencil? And I will say no to that. No, we are not doing that. Why? Because what you see, let's say we are talking about a day one program launch, right? So when we're talking about a day one program launch, then you will be seeing multiple verticals there. A vertical will be coming to the delivery execution, a vertical will be coming to the engineering, and then we have got, local IT and so on, right? Now, work breakdown structure aim is that we go to that level, we go to the vertical level, and we stop there. And that's what we call the package. Okay. So imagine that if I take the example of a day one launch of a site, then we will say that, okay, day one launch is on the top level. That's on the very top. You write it down on the board maybe, and then you are cutting out or spreading it out into two branches. One part will be the construction or the real estate piece, which probably a new building has to be built, or maybe existing building has to be leased out, right? So that is one part. The other part is that the IT piece, the IT infrastructure has to be like designed and developed and deployed for that particular building. Right. So then again, when you look into the real estate piece, there may be a couple of components. And what are those? Maybe they have to develop the building as per the headcount which is required. And then, of course, the data rooms, they have to develop as per our standards, like the MDF room and the IDF room. They also have to ensure the workstation areas, the scrum areas, the cafeteria, parking, everything is done, right, as per the standards. So those are the different verticals. So probably one person from the construction team will take care of the data rooms. One person will take care of the cafeteria and so on. So these are the different verticals. But further, that breakdown of the work package into activities will not be done into WBS. That's the next step. That's after the scope baseline is done. Okay. So if you think about the day one, then yes, I will say Till the time the verticals are identified, till that point is WBS. Now we are not following this kind of standard here like we do a WBS in the beginning for the day one. And why? Because it's a pretty known space for us. We are doing it for a pretty long time, and we probably know on the back of our hand like what are the different verticals, what are the activities, and the people who are actually in those verticals and they own them, they probably will be, you know, memorize those tasks as well, like done it so many times, right? One, two, three, four, five, and MDF, you do like 10 MDFs to deliver, then you will be knowing all the, 150 plus or 160 or 170 plus tasks which are being listed there, right? You will know that entire sequence. So since we know that scope so nicely, we are not going to follow the WBS here, and let's say that we are not having too much of ambiguity or complexity here because we have got a very well drafted SOP and run book and so on, right? We have to follow that from the engineering standpoint, I'm trying to say, and from the program management standpoint as well. We have got the TPM playbooks. Now, uh, imagine that's not the case. If that is not the case, let's say you're working in a company, let's say IBM, okay, and your client is Citibank, okay. Now, then you are in a major shift. Why? First of all, your customer is not internal, number one thing, right? So when your customer is external, trust me, the entire project management game changes. It becomes in a different, or it comes in a different level. Okay, here probably we are not looking into scope and then time and then, calculating the cost on that. We already know a ballpark cost. If you ask any of the TPMs here that what's the cost of a 200-seater MDF, they immediately will tell you a number. Okay, and then probably year wise you can add some contingency to that, some inflation number to that, and you get into a kind of a approximate, a ROM estimate for MDF in the next year as well. So you have got an overall budget, probably 5-10% or 20% contingency is added there, and the budget is being approved in the beginning of the year or in the mid of the year, right? So that's the trend we follow. But when you are talking about the external customer, okay, the customer is not a part of your company, then certain things happen. The home company, let's say IBM here, they will be signing a contract with Citibank. Okay, I have been in programs where I will say IBM, and then we had a client. Probably I will name that client here. But the contract which was signed is that this is the day on which we expect the deliverables to be given from IBM to the client, and any number of days that IBM misses that particular project go live or deadline, for each day of miss, a penalty has to be paid by IBM. So it's that serious. It comes to monetary, kind of stuff where the parent company has to pay a penalty to the customer company because they did some delay. So here you need a very proper solid planning. Okay, here you cannot really rely on heuristic data or generalistic data. You really have to engage your entire project team, and then you come up that, okay, this is the scope. We have been asked to probably shift entire data from the data center to the cloud for this particular client. Now let's find out what are the different components of this entire project, and what is the work package that looks like. Okay, so that's how it works out. So when we look into the WBS again, when I show you how the WBS actually looks like, then probably I can explain to you in detail that there is something called finance controls on that, and some control accounts are there through which we track. Just a sideliner. I don't know how many of you have worked here for a client company, but if you work for a client company sitting in a home company, let's say here IBM to a ex client, then your client pays for you basically. Okay. And when the client is paying for you, then you have to fill up a worksheet, and the worksheet will be having a project code of that particular project. There may be 200 projects which IBM will be running at one time, right? And out of that, since you are running that one particular project, you have to actually fill up the worksheet every week that you worked for, 40 hours a week. Uh, and then you have to actually plug in there like this is my project ID, and that will be billable. So that goes to the client will be paying for you. Okay, so that's how it works out. So you are completely tracked and monitored. The finance is tracked and monitored, and there are particular guys there from the client company as well who are doing it. Like you will be having you will be having a program manager from IBM, or the parent company. Similarly, you will be having a program manager from the customer company as well, from the client company, and they also will be doing the final UAT, the final acceptance criteria check, and find out, okay, fine, whatever we were given, that is what we wanted in the beginning. Okay, so that kind of seriousness is there, and that is why we say that since the money is involved, contract is involved, brand image of the company is involved with the external client in a much intense way. So we always go through this kind of process as documented by PMI. Now, WBS. I'm never a fan of like definitions, but just to give you a kind of a rough picture what WBS is. Okay, so I will tell you like what actually happens. So WBS, you can think of like a visual depiction, okay, of the entire scope on a project. Whatever you see on the WBS, that's your scope, and what you don't see on the WBS is not your scope. As simple as that. Okay, so like I said, a big project, like you want to transfer all the data center, data of a company to cloud. Okay, that particular project ABC will be broken down till the level till we reach work packages, and we will not further break down the work package into activities because that is after the WBS step. Okay, we are just trying to, what we are trying to do, we are trying to sign off a scope baseline, and scope baseline means project scope statement plus WBS dictionary. Once we get these three guys done, then we can sign it off saying like this is the scope baseline and get it signed from the project sponsor as well. Okay, we are not always getting it signed from the project sponsor, but like I said, you definitely have to keep the key stakeholders of the client company on the loop, and let them know that this is what the entire scope looks like, and if there is any further adds or subtracts they want to do, then you give a time to them also that let's do it in this time frame so we can finalize it. Okay, WBS main point is that you are uh, taking an action on scope creep. Scope creep is a disease actually. Okay, scope creep is something you might have seen. Sometimes when you work on CIB day one programs, at least 2018-19 when I used to work for them as a TPM, I have seen, you're almost in the middle of the project and somebody says, we have to do one more lab, and that's called a scope creep. That puts the entire project health into a amber or a red status because that was not considered in the beginning. The business would not have told you for some reason which we don't know, and finally that has to be done. That's the demand, and then either you rebaseline, like I said, rebaseline is the last option when the program goes into red, or you probably try to compress things by adding more people into that program. And any which ways it was still, I will say, I will not say it's an okay thing to do. It's definitely something, it's a lessons learned. We should never like repeat that in the future. But since it is an internal program, still we manage it, right? We kind of say, okay, we'll re-baseline it. And somehow we manage it with the business and all that. But think about it, external customer, can you do that? Never. Because their one day miss also leads to a penalty of money. And then rebaselining is the last option. I mean, if you want to rebaseline any of the baselines like scope, cost, time, which you agreed and got signed off, and if you want to rebaseline any of them in the future, you have to get a sign off from the sponsor. Okay, so helps to ensure that no deliverables are missed at all. There is no scope creep basically. And this is the tool, the WBS is the tool which will enable to clarify what is the scope for the program, number one. And if you are going to add any additional scope, that also can be clearly seen because the WBS, which is in front of you, that's a scope. Anything which is going to be added or subtracted in the future, that is the additional scope, right? Now, the last line, I put that in red for the perspective of exam. In your exam, sometimes PMI will not call out very clearly what the project manager is doing because it's a use case, right? They probably will say, decompose. The project manager is decomposing the deliverables into work packages. Now, understand the decompose word itself means that the project manager is doing WBS activity. Normally, how it is done, I will tell you, and I have done that like twice in my parent company. Uh, you the entire like project team of say 10, 20, 30 people, they fly out to a location and they book a conference room, probably 5 or 6 days. The day one, they focus on project scope statement, WBS, and the dictionary. So day one, they are actually signing off the project scope baseline. Okay, day two, they focus on the activities, the network diagrams, the critical path, and the schedule of the project. And day two, they sign off the schedule baseline. and day 3 they spend on, they means the project team, they will be spending on the cost and the budget, looking at the schedule, right? So when all these 3 baselines are done in the 3 days, the remaining 2 days they will either spend on the risk or known unknowns or unknown unknowns, or kind of things which are surprises, which might be a risk in the program and so on. And that's how the workshop is over and finished. At the end of the workshop, the project manager is expected to document all this and then get a sign off from the client company. Okay, that's how it is done. So depending on the schedule and depending on the cost, most of the things you can easily find out. Okay, if this is the budget I have got and this is the schedule, then I probably will need X number of guys to get it done in Y number of days. So you know that how many people you have to engage there, how many engineers you need. So all that is extremely clear when you have got the scope, cost, and time in front of you. Okay, so that's how it is done. It's kind of a workshop, and the project manager will be facilitating the workshop to ensure that the people in the room will be having most of the time they will be having sticky notes with them. They will write the component they think to be a part of the scope, and they will go and paste it in the big whiteboard. And PM's job is to ensure that once in a while they will go to the whiteboard and they will again recalibrate that entire WBS. They will arrange them in a particular level and order. Okay. So let's have a look into how to create. I would have loved to do a workshop on this. Okay. Probably a live session. So if there is a time in between, sometime any of the Fridays, then probably we can do not a in person, but at least a virtual workshop on any of a virtual project we pick up, and then we can do the complete work breakdown structure on that. But this is how it looks like. It's just a kind of a high level diagram. Again, if you look into the diagram, you will see that, let me try to, sorry, let me try to pick up a annotation here. Give me 1 second, please. And then let's see if we can go around this stuff. The first part is the project name, right on the top. That's the big one. Where do you write migrate data center to cloud? I'm just trying to give, or maybe it's a CIB day one. Okay, I'm trying to take something else apart from CIB, because CIB you probably have not done a WBS as such. Like I said, it's a pretty much known space for us, so we don't do it. It's pretty much standard project for us. Okay, now once you write the project name, then you're going to break it. Here we are breaking it out into mainly 2 parts, but that there can be 4 or 5 parts as well. So one example can be, let's say, Boeing as a company is going to manufacture the next Dreamliner, okay, maybe XXX, and that's going to be launched in the year 2028, and they will start working right now. And what they will do is that they will say, okay, this aircraft will be having 5 major or 2 major like sections on the top. One will be the manufacturing piece, and one probably will be the selling piece. So manufacturing will involve again the verticals like getting the fuselage done, the rudder arm done, wings done, everything done, and also the parts of the fly-by-wire and all that stuff, right? The computation part. And when it comes to the other section, that can be the sales part. Okay, how many air shows you're going to do, plan it out. Maybe Paris or somewhere you will do air shows, and which are the teams, the verticals of pre-sales, sales, and all that stuff will be happening with the different kind of contracts and the compliance that you have to meet for the different countries in which you are going to sell the aircraft, right? So like that, when we keep on breaking it, we come to a point, like you will look at the bottom, you will see I've got 2 kind of options. One is called a work package, which is light orange, and one is control account, which is dark orange. So you will break it down till you reach the work package. Okay, so work package probably will be something like this. Okay, 1112, I'm just giving a dotted number, it can be anything. Okay, now this work package, any work package, okay, will be connected to one single control account. Now you may ask me, what is a control account? A control account is nothing but the finance piece. It can be having many other things, but control account is a kind of an identifier for that particular work package. So let's say that I have got the overall budget for the program, right? Which is great. And I know I have to spend this much money for this big program. Now, what happens is that probably I would like to know that which of the verticals is spending what amount of money. So then I will say that, okay, for this particular the fuselage creation, I have to spend X amount of dollars. And you internally give a budget to that, and then you manage it through the control account, so that you know that for each of the verticals, let's say for the IT piece or the electronics piece or for any of the XYZ components or verticals which you create, let's say each of the stencils which you have got on the work front, those stencils have to be managed or have to be monitored in the back end, that what is the spent on each of these, what were the milestones for each of these, and are they meeting or not meeting. So it's a kind of a way that every 3 months, 4 months, the program manager can just have a quick check into the control accounts and say that what is the health of the control accounts. Maybe the overall program is green, but maybe the control accounts, probably somebody is going to reach a finance crunch soon. Maybe one of the components will be reach a finance crunch soon because maybe the hardware, the pricing, shot up, or maybe the resource which the vendor was giving, they went to a conclusion that the contract has to be renewed or the price is increasing. So whatever it is, the program manager will have a feel that okay, these programs are getting into some kind of crunch, or they are not going to meet the milestones, or there may be a threat in the future, though the overall program status may be green. Okay, so that's how it looks like. It can be easily done. The WBS can be easily done on a Microsoft project kind of a software. But what the best way to do it is that do it in person if possible, as a workshop, and do it on a whiteboard. Okay, that's the best way, because what you write on the board or what you paste on the board is seen by the entire audience, and then people can make their comments, and they can adjust things, and finally you will say, okay, we have reached a final conclusion, we have reviewed that, this looks like the WBS. Now you might ask, okay, this is the WBS, then what is the WBS dictionary? So dictionary is nothing but, think about it like a glossary. What happens is that sometimes in the scope there will be certain items, certain phrases which probably is not known by all the stakeholders or all the program managers even, uh, or the project managers. So when I was working for this particular client in IBM, it was a 3-year program, and there were 30 PMs plugged into the program, and none of the PMs were not knowing what the other PMs are doing. So they were just managing their own projects. Yes, there were some connectivity, some kind of a dependency was there amongst the programs, but not much. Maybe in the very build stage where the VM team told us that they want to build all the servers in one shot to save the time and to get the certificates quickly. But other than that, when you run the entire middleware components, people who have done infrastructure programs, they will be knowing what I'm talking about, the middleware installations, and then getting into SSL and certificates and all that. Every PM is working on their package. They are not knowing, and they don't have to know also what's happening with the other 29 verticals. So there, the dictionary is very handy. Maybe you are looking into some kind of a dependency on somebody else's vertical, and you find out some word like compliance to meet the FAR regulations, and you're not sure what is that, so you go to WBS dictionary and you find out what exactly a FAR regulation means. Okay, and then you find out, okay, from here it's a written document about anything which is beyond the normal verbiage the PM teams are using. It can have many other stuff as well. Like I said, explanation of the milestones can be there, but the main work of the dictionary is that uh, it acts like a glossary to the WBS. Okay, so that also is documented by the PM with the help of the team. So that's kind of your check about the entire WBS. Let me just remove this annotation and move forward. Benefits, I think we have discussed it, most of it. So first part is that WBS, the benefit is prevent scope creep. Okay, that is the main advantage of a WBS. Scope creep, trust me, it is one of the most painful point in a project, and it can come into the project and just destabilize the entire project if there is a scope creep or something which we have not thought about when we are writing the plan for the project. So every head has to be there in the WBS, every head of the project team, and that's how we prevent the scope creep from the beginning. A project which is not having any scope creep, I'm talking about a conventional waterfall project, and it goes in a smooth line from end to end. uh, those projects, you will see, they are always done on time, as per the budget and as per the agreed timelines. Now, WBS of one project, that definitely can be used for a future similar project. Why? Because you might be doing a lot of projects of similar nature, and then WBS, what you developed right now, that can act as a template for the next one with maybe a little amount of changes like here and there, but at least you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to build the wheel from the beginning. It's kind of there as a template for you. Okay, so that's how the company historical like records, they will be filled with projects and their WBS and lessons learned and everything. So WBS is something where the PM can go back to the historical data and they will say, okay, I think I found a very similar project 1 year back, and let me see how the WBS looks like, and they can use it as a template for the future projects. It also helps the PM to identify the risk better. Okay, why? Because when you are looking the entire scope of a very large complex program. Now, hold on a minute. Why I keep on saying a very large complex program? Because from PMP perspective, from PMP exam in a perspective, PMP assumes that whatever the use cases you see on the exam, they all are large, complex, and they're running across regions in globe, like they're global projects, and they are having a minimum budget of $1 million. So that's how the PMI would like to gauge a person who is sitting for the PMP exam. So you should be very well acquainted and comfortable by working in a large, complex global project with a high budget, right? So your chances of looking at the project minute stuff or the entire scope will be very less, because there are so many verticals, right? Like I said, there were 30 PMs in 30 verticals, right? In one of the programs I've worked. So for the program manager or the lead project manager, it's simple when they look into the WBS and they know these are the work packages which we finalized. We are not going to do anything beyond this, right? So anything which is missing there or anything which is not properly documented there, that is a risk. And the PM can easily find out the risk by working with the team that, okay, I think this also has to be put as one of the packages, and then break it down further. Okay, they would have told that we only want to talk about, or we are only giving the work package of the manufacturing of, let's say, the wings of the aircraft, right? But that has to be broken into two spots there. One spot can be the wings, one can be the spoilers, and so on, or the fuel tank and all that, right? So basically, the more nicely you break down the work packages, the better the things are in control, and the better they can be driven and managed, and the risk will be less. All right, with that, we came to almost the end of the training. Let's do a wrap up here. First thing first, WBS, it identifies all the deliverables to be completed. Do not ever confuse the WBS to be activities. It is not. Think about them like the stencils in the work front, but they are kind of blank. The activities are yet to be pumped in when we get into the activity stage of planning. If it is not in WBS, it is not part of the project. Very simple, very straightforward, period there, okay? Something which you not see in the WBS, it is not a part of the project. Basically, it's missing in the scope baseline. Now, dictionary. So dictionary can be having many components. Like I said, it acts like a glossary, but again, it can include the descriptions of multiple stuff like schedule milestones, maybe durations, acceptance criteria, that all will be explained there. Now, when you are working, let's say for CIB day one, we know the UAT very well, right? I mean, most of us will be knowing the UAT at like the back of their hand. But when you are thinking about, let's say, like a large complex project for external client, you may not be too much thorough. And that's when the client has to tell you that these are the acceptance criteria. So when you move the data from the data center to cloud, from the on-prem data center to the cloud, that point of time, the delivery manager of the client team, they will be running particular XYZ test, and they will ensure that, okay, after running the test, we are coming at a conclusion that all the acceptance criteria has been met. Okay, so that all will be defined in the WPS. Somewhere it has to be written and documented, right? The durations, interdependencies amongst the multiple verticals, and any other thing which is not very clear in the work package, that will be documented in the WPS. Think of it as a glossary. And finally, again, I repeat, a scope baseline is basically your project scope statement plus WBS dictionary. In fact, many of the workshops I have seen, the project manager, they do the WBS and the scope statement like together. in one shot. And dictionary is just a part of like 3-4 hours where people can document stuff. But the point is the scope statement and the WBS, then they give a lot of importance to the WBS. Okay. Because from the project charter, what you got by talking with the stakeholders, what you got the idea, you wrote the project scope statement, right? But to have the entire work packages in front of you, you definitely need to do brainstorming. You need to have your entire project team here and look at some historical records of company. If there is a like templatized kind of WBS there, that will really help you to get a nice, deeply driven kind of a WBS. All right, with that, we came to the end of the lesson. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope you enjoyed it. See you again in lesson 9.